Thank you. I wanted to get the green light.
Gabbai says go or go.
I'm not a gabbai. If I was a gabbai, the show wouldn't look this way.
The board member.
It's recording.
Okay, so the topic is a Pesach topic. The Zman, the time of the Seder, particularly the time of ending the Seder. We'll see, it's been a major halachic issue for centuries and centuries. There's numerous opinions on the matter. And we'll also see a dispute, it appears, between the early Chabad rabbeim and the rebbe. Seems to be an argument between them. But you'll hear what I have to say, and then you'll decide if you want to pelt me with stones or maybe there's something to it. No, there definitely was a dispute. The question is, what's the halachic reasoning behind? And we'll see, everything in Mitzvah Shem will become clear as we go along. So we begin with number 1. It's 2 sheets. There's a number of pieces from Gemara we have, a few Rambams. Of course, we have a piece of Shagas Aryeh. We threw it in. And then there's a well-known tshuva of the Avnei Nezer. It's a well-known tshuva. Most people only know the last paragraph. For your consumption, we have the whole tshuva. It's not very long. It's number 10. And of course, we will see what the Avnei Nezer says as well. Here we go. Number 1. Number 1, the Gemara in Psachim, the very end of Masechta Psachim. The Gemara quotes a debate between 2 Tanoim, Rabbi Akiva versus Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And the debate is also found earlier in Shas in Masechta Brachas, but we're quoting it from the end of Psachim. The Tanya, there's a Braise, the Pasuk says in Parshas Boi, Va'achlus habasar b'layla hazeh. The Yidden need to eat the flesh of the Korban Pesach on this night, the night of the 15th at night. Not before night, and not too late either. The question is, when is the end time? The early time seems to be clear, Laila. When is Laila? Well, that's, who knows when Laila is. Sundown, Seisek Echavim, but whenever Laila is. Now, B'Pashtus, the Gemara already establishes in the beginning of Brachas and in the beginning of Shabbos, Laila is when the stars come out. Fact. The issue is that after the sun sets, it could be the stars have already appeared. That's why we have a twilight zone, Bein Hashmashos. The reason Bein Hashmashos is questionable day or night is because it may already be Seisek Echavim. But definitely night depends on the stars. Okay. The question is, until when can you eat the Korban Pesach? So says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Omer Ne'emar Kan. It says here, Balayla Hazeh. It says by the meat of the Korban Pesach, you got to eat it Balayla. V'ne'emar lahalon. It says elsewhere, also in Parshas Boi, concerning Makas B'cheres, V'avarti beretz Mitzrayim Balayla Hazeh. God says, I will pass through Egypt on this very night. Ma'ala halan ad chatzos. When did the Eibishter smite the firstborns? It wasn't the beginning of the night. It wasn't at the end. It was chatzos, exactly chatzos. So afkan, so too here ad chatzos. So just like the Eibishter smote the Mitzrayim by midnight or at midnight, so too when the word balayla appears in both places. Just like by Makas B'cheres it means be'emtza layla, midnight, so too by the Korban Pesach you have to eat it by midnight. Now you're probably wondering, the Eibishter didn't smite the firstborns by midnight, he did it at midnight. Maybe you have to eat the Korban Pesach itself on the moment of midnight. So that's what the Avnei Nezer is going to discuss. I will tell you that in the world of the Briske, the Soloveitchik family, the Brisker world, there's no such thing as midnight. Midnight is a non-existence. You have the first part of the night, and the moment the first part of the night ends, the next moment is the second part of the night. There is no moment of midnight. You have the first half, and you have the second half. You have the last millisecond of the first half, and the next millisecond is already the second half. So, the Velvel of Brisk said the same thing with death. There's no moment of death. There's life, you have the last millisecond of life, and the next millisecond, if it's no longer life, is death. He said that's how it worked. By the last millisecond of the first half of the night, there was still life. By the next millisecond, which already introduced the second half, there was already death. So neither death or midnight are actually, there's actually a moment on the clock when you could pinpoint them. Anyhow, but that's what they say in the Brisker world. What?
That's it every time, not just the midnight.
Okay, fine. Fine. Either way. Let's not get carried away with the philosophy behind it. But this is, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, before midnight. And it's biblical. Minat Torah, you have to eat before midnight. Rabbi Akiva, who was a colleague of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he was older than him, but he responds, it says in Parshas Boy, you should eat it b'chipazon in haste. What does it mean you should eat the Korban Pesach in haste? The Yidden were stuck in their homes that night, the night of the 15th of Nisan, the night of Makas B'chayris. The Yidden sheltered themselves in their homes. They plastered the doorposts and the lintel with blood. They were indoors till the morning. They couldn't leave till dawn. What do you mean that? Why did they have to eat the Korban Pesach in haste? There's plenty of time. Says Rabbi Akiva, it means ad shas chipazon. It means eat it until the moment of haste. The moment of haste was dawn. You see, midnight, Paro ran and said, Moshe, get out of here. And you know what the Yidden said? We can't. God said we have to stay home till dawn. Paro said, get out of here. The gates are open. And the Yidden said, we'll take our time. We're going to leave on our own terms. Hashem said you can't leave your homes till dawn. And at that point, you could be sure they ran out. Ki barach ha'am, the Yidden, they left hastily. So says Rabbi Akiva, when the Pasuk says in Parshas Boy, you should eat the Korban Pesach in haste, it doesn't mean to stuff it down your throat. It means to eat it until you run out, which means you have till dawn. You have till dawn. So this is the big debate. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says you have till midnight. Rabbi Akiva says you have till dawn. Go to number 2. It's also a Gemara on the same place. Omar Rava. These days, unfortunately, we have no Korban Pesach. When it comes to Moror, the Gemara brings a debate if Moror these days is rabbinic or biblical. The halacha is it's only rabbinic. The halacha is that Moror is contingent and dependent on the Korban Pesach. There's no Korban Pesach. Minat Torah, there's no Moror. It's just a Rabbanon. Matzah though is still Doraisa because there's a pasuk that says Be'edev Toichlu Matzahs, nothing to do with the Korban Pesach. See, Moror is always spoken about together with the Korban Pesach. Matzah has a standalone pasuk, Be'erev Toichlu Matzah. You got to eat matzahs the night of the 15th. And the Gemara learns from there. That's why these days matzah is still doiraisa. I'll just throw in a story. We're going to quote the Avnei Nezer, so I'll just quote a Maisa, that the Avnei Nezer, Bavremel of Sochachov, was an incredible genius in Poland. He was an unwell person physically. He had problems breathing. In fact, he once had to travel to some Carpathian Mountains, I don't know, some mountain region to get fresh air. And they said it was better for his lungs or something. And his attendant looks around, he can't find the old rabbi. He searches, he sees the Avnei Nezer had run down the entire mountain, like a young man, like a young bacher. So the attendant runs, he's puffing and puffing. He says, Rabbi, what are you doing? What are you running for? He says, you didn't hear the women singing on top of the mountain? So he ran like a kid down to the bottom of the mountain. Anyhow, but he was a son-in-law of the Mendel of Kotsk, Rebbe Nachum Mendel Morgenstern, the famous Kotsker Rebbe. You're talking in the times of the Tzemach Tzedek. The Kotsker passed away, in fact, a few years before the Tzemach Tzedek. And after he passed away, the Avnei Nezer went to the Kotzker's student, the Chidushei Harim, Rabbi Yitzchak Meir of Gur. And when the Chidushei Harim passed away, which was the same year that Tzemach Tzedek passed away, 1866, the Avnei Nezer was still a young man. He went to Chanoich Henich Alexander, the Alexander Chassidim. He went to the Alexander Rebbe. And only later in life did he become a Rebbe in Sochachov, the Avnei Nezer. His name was Avram Ravremel Borenstein. Borenstein was his last name. And while he was a practicing Rebbe and mainly a Rosh Yeshiva in Sochachov, an old Yid once came to visit him. And this old Yid, decades before, was a chassid of the Kotzker. And the Avnei Nezer remembered him. And it was a beautiful thing to see one of the older chassidim from his shver from 40, 50 years earlier. And they had a discussion, and this older Yid asked the Avnei Nezer, whatever happened that Pesach when you guys were in Kotsk? Well, the story was like this. With the last 20 years of the Kotzker's life, he unfortunately, he lived as a hermit in his room, very little interaction with his chassidim, and that's why one of his chassidim, Rabbi Leiner, became an Ishbitzer rebbe. He broke away from his rebbe because the Kotzker was almost inaccessible. But it was once on Pesach, and there were a few people sitting around the table, and the Kotzker came to Moror, and he had all this moror by his plate, and he wasn't giving it out. And the people that were there, the Kotzker was a fiery man. In fact, the Rebbe actually once told, you see on a video, he told one of the Kotzker's Einiklach, the Kotzker was a sharper, very sharp. And the Rebbe was telling this guy, therefore, this guy came by the Rebbe, I'm an Einikul of the Kotzker. So the Rebbe said, you have a responsibility then, you have to keep on the legacy of the Kotzker. So the Chassidim didn't want to ask the Kotzker for moror, he would curse them. So one of them nudged the Avnei Nezer, the Kotzker's son-in-law, maybe you could get your shver to pass around the moror. So the Avnei Nezer, on the spot, he tells his shver, there's a debate in Gemara if moror is biblical these days or rabbinic. It can't be rabbinic. I have a proof from tonight that it must be biblical. Because if it's rabbinic, why isn't the rabbi giving it out? That was a cute thing that he said. So it was a cute word, but the Kotzker all of a sudden said, you're right. And as he was giving out the moror, he screams, moror fressers! And he screamed that, and the Chassidim was so afraid, they left the table. So the Kotzker was sitting there with his son-in-law, the Avnei Nezer, and they were schmoozing about the Haggadah. Then the Kotzker looks around, and he sees nobody's there. So he asked the Masharas, the attendant, where's the Olam? He said they ran for their lives after you screamed at them. He says, I wasn't screaming at the people here. And that was the end of the story. So later they explained what the Kotzker meant was, when he said moror fressers, he said, Eibishter, he was talking to God, Eibishter, the Yidden down here are fressing moror a whole year. You satiate us with tzoros. You give the Yidden so many issues a whole year, we're fressing moror a whole year, enough already. Enough moror, Eibishter, you give us too much moror. We're fressing it, every moment there's moror, day in, day out. That's what he meant. But anyhow, Al Kapanim, moror these days, we paskin is rabbinic. And matzah, though, is biblical because there's a pasuk that says you got to eat matzah, nothing to do with Korban Pesach. Be'erev toichlu matzahs.
Just as a slight aside, if you have two yidden, and is it better that one yid should have the complete shear of something, or two should share it?
And neither will have the shear? Yeah. That's a good question. That needs a shear on its own. There's a here. According to many poskim, there's no such thing as chatzi shear by a mitzvah. Right? We know we paskin when it comes to prohibition, even half the shear is asur min haTorah like Rabbi Yochanan. But when it comes to a mitzvah, if you do only part, is it an inyan min haTorah? So those that hold that it isn't, it's nothing, would definitely say better one guy eat the matzah. At least something will happen. But the chidah, there are those who say that min haTorah there is a chatzi shear by a mitzvah. So if you have two people doing half the shear, and one guy doing the whole and the other guy doing nothing, might be a question. I would still assume better one guy do the whole mitzvah, but it might have to do with that debate if there's chatzi shear by a mitzvah. But either way, that's a good question, and maybe some point we'll readdress it. But back to number 2. So Rav says like this: these days you eat matzah. It's biblical to eat matzah these days, because even though there's no Korban Pesach, doesn't matter. Be'erev toichlu matzahs, you got to eat matzah regardless. But says Rav, if you eat it after chatzos, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lo yotzi yedei chavasei. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds, comes chatzos, the night is over. Just like you can't eat the Korban Pesach after chatzos, we saw in number 1, matzah is the same thing. And moror, and also telling over the Haggadah, it all stops at chatzos. All the mitzvahs are compared to each other. In fact, frek the Gemara Pshit, isn't that obvious? Says the Gemara, Kivan de itkish lePesach, matzah and the Korban Pesach are compared to each other. Al matzah sumaroidim yochlu, we compare the matzah to the Pesach. So obviously kepesach dami. So what's Rav's chiddush? Says the Gemara, no, mahu the tema. You might have thought ha'afke krom hekesha. The Torah excluded matzah from being compared to Korban Pesach from the very fact that today it's biblical to eat matzah. In other words, you have one pasuk where the Torah puts the matzah together with Korban Pesach. But you have another pasuk, Be'erev Toichlu Matzis, which teaches us it's nothing to do with Korban Pesach, and even though today there's no Korban, you still have to eat matzah. So you might have thought that maybe the time of matzah is also different than the Korban Pesach. So Kamash Molam, that's why Rava says that Lemilsa Kamaisa Hadre, that when the Torah says you have to eat matzah, although there's no Korban Pesach, but it's still compared to Korban Pesach as far as the time. Okay, let's just leave it at that. What we have so far is like this. According to Belazar ben Azariah, when midnight comes, you can't do the Korban Pesach, you can't eat matzah, not maror, and you can't do Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim, you can't say Haggadah. According to Rabbi Akiva, it all goes until dawn. Okay, so the question is, who do we paskin like? So go to number 3. Number 3, you have a Rambam. Mitzvahs asem in HaTorah. It's a mitzvah in HaTorah lechol matzah, to eat matzah on the night of the 15th. Shenemar bo'erev toichel matzahs. You always have to. B'chol makom u'b'chol zman. I don't care. You're in Antarctica, you're in the North Pole, wherever you are, whenever. V'loi tol achilazu b'korban pesach. It's not contingent on the korban. No. Elazu, it's a mitzvah b'fnei atzma. U'mitzvasa kol halayla. Eating matzah goes a whole night, like Rabbi Akiva. B'shar or regal, but the rest of Pesach, eating matzah is a reshus. You could eat potatoes a whole Pesach. If you want to eat matzah, you eat. You want to eat rice or doichen, you eat the Sephardi, or you want to eat different things. Belel chamisha also b'vad chayv. Only the night of the 15th is an obligation. U'misha achol kazayis, and once you had a kazayis, you're good to go. That's all the Eibishter wants. It seems like he's passing like Rabbi Akiva. He definitely is. According to Belazar ben Azariah, you don't have a whole night to eat matzah. Fine. Look at number 4. Number 4 is a Rambam, not about matzah, but about Korban Pesach. Kvar biyarnu bekama mekaymus. We said many places. She'ein ha-Pesach nechol elad chatzos. The Korban Pesach stops at midnight, but it's only d'Rabbanan. Kedei laharchik min aveira. Because if you have a whole night, I have plenty of time. Before you know it, it's dawn. If there's a deadline, an early deadline, you get your act together. V'din Torah, the biblical, yachol kol halayla, the whole night till dawn. So the Rambam in both cases is passing like Rabbi Akiva. Legabe the Korban Pesach all night, matzah all night. But there's one difference. When it comes to the Korban Pesach, the Rambam says, rabbinically, you have to stop at midnight. You got to get it in by midnight. When it comes to matzah, number 3, the Rambam doesn't mention midnight. What's going on over there? What?
Just a technical question. You know that at the time of the Rambam, how was the midnight determined? There were no clocks that were efficient that would work in the dark. They only had solar clocks.
However, they always, the middle of the night, you had their hourglasses. They had hourglasses. You're saying they didn't know the exact moment. They're roughly close enough.
So the Brisker are right. There is no exact.
No. The Brisker's talking in the eyes of in the ultimate truth of the matter.
I know, but even today there is no midnight. They're right. It's an arbitrary determination.
No. The Brisker idea is that midnight is just an illusion. There is. It's Who?
Brisker.
Oh, we're gonna see. No. We're gonna see. It's fascinating. Mamash fascinating. All right. So this is an issue that I remember years ago. I was wondering. You learned the Rambam. Very strange. In both scenarios, the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Akiva. Both the Korban Pesach and the Matzah, the Rambam says you have a whole night. But by the Korban Pesach, he throws in the midnight business. He doesn't throw it in by the Matzah. What's the pshat? In the beginning of Masechta Brachos, the Mishnah there says there are many mitzvahs that go a whole night, but the Chacham said do it by midnight as a precaution. Kriyishma, the Torah says you read it b'shach b'cha, which Rabbi Eliezer translates that to mean when you go to sleep, so it's only the first part of the night. But we translate u'b'shach b'cha to mean while you are sleeping. So it's the entire night till dawn. The Chachamim say that do it by midnight, as a precaution. We always say that you got to do it by midnight as a precaution. There are many korbanos that you're allowed to eat. You shecht it today at 3 p.m. It's all done. You can eat the meat today and tonight until dawn. Many korbanos have day and night till dawn. That's biblical. The Chacham said you got to end it by midnight as a precautionary measure. So you would think matzah should be no different. Why would matzah be different than Kriyishma? No, but Kriyishma we say by midnight. Like you would think that the Rambam for some reason omitted it, but the Rambam would agree. Yes, if he was, he would say yes. You should stop by Chatzos, and that's how the pre-Chodosh. The Chizkiah di Silva was one of the greatest Sfardische poskim in the end of the 1600s in Eretz Yisrael. He writes in his commentary in Shulchan Aruch that yes, the Rambam, even though the Rambam's lenient like Rabbi Akiva, that's biblically. Rabbinically, you got to eat your matzah by chatzos. Like every mitzvah that applies at night, you have a safeguard of midnight. But if you look in number 5, you'll see Rabbeinu Manoach disagrees. Rabbeinu Manoach was one of the Rishonim in the 13th century. We don't know exactly the years, but he lived in Provence, in Narbonne and Lunel. There's a Tosfos in Masechta Chulin that quotes from a certain Rabbeinu Manoach, and some historians believe it's this Rabbeinu Manoach over here. But either way, he was one of the great Rishonim, and he has a commentary on parts of Rambam, and he's a very authoritative Rishon. And this is what he writes on his comments to the Rambam in number 3, the Rambam about matzah. And I read number 5. Amrinon bebrachas, we say in brachas, kol masha amru ad chatzos, anything which the Chacham said till chatzos, really mitzvasa kol alayla. Minat Torah goes a whole night till dawn. Koloimar mitzvasa minat Torah. The Mishnah says an expression, anything which ends at chatzos, minat Torah, nothing ends at chatzos, except for Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah on Pesach. But usually the Torah never says anything ends at chatzos. Chatzos is a rabbinic convention, and they applied it to mitzvahs that biblically go the entire night. And they made a precautionary measure to get it done by chatzos. But va'oid shon, we also saw that loy amru chacham mad chatzos. Why did Chacham invent this chatzos business? Kedei laharchik me'aver as a precautionary measure. Umemela shmas. What do you see from there? That matzah mitzvasa kol alayla. Minat Torah matzah goes a whole night. Demidi huta, and he says more than that. He wants to tie in the Chacham did not make a precautionary measure by matzah. He argues in the Pri Chodosh. He says the Rambam deliberately omitted any mention of midnight by the matzah. Because midi utam, you know why by Pesach there's a precautionary measure? You know why? Because if you're going to wait till dawn and you mix up the clock, you get chorus. If you eat leftover kachim, it's chorus. Shema yoichamenu after alam of the shachar u'mischayev chorus. So therefore we ended by chatzos. If you didn't finish eating, you're going to end up destroying carbonos that could have been eaten. It's worth it. Umutav, it's better she'avoy kachim lebeis hapsul lezman mu'at shelo yelechol achar chatzos mishayechav v'avel lidei chorus. If you ended by chatzos, you might have leftover meat. It's worth it. It's worth it to throw out some good carbonos meat instead of taking the risk of leaving it till dawn. And if someone mixes it up by a moment, he's going to get chorus. It's only by chorus, he says. But by matzah, the less a high time mashari. But by matzah, there's no. If you eat matzah too late, you just blew the mitzvah. Okay, we learned last week, right? If it's in the middle of the zman, they can kill you. But once the zman ends, they don't hurt you for missing a mitzvah saseh. So therefore, that's what the and Teddy says. What's my proof? The diuk we made ourselves. Shadi Kosav by matzah. The Rambam says mitzvah kol halayla. It's a whole night. He left out any mention of chatzos by the matzah. But ubishilhi at the end of the 8th parak of Korban Pesach, which I quoted you in number 4, he says mitzvah Pesach is kol halayla, but Chacham said till midnight. As a precautionary measure. Why did the Rambam write it by the Korban Pesach and not by the matzah? It's simple. By the Korban Pesach, you're running into an issue of chorus. By the matzah, you're not running into chorus.
Eating matzah.
The Pri Chodosh, though, vehemently disagrees. The Pri Chodosh, was a couple hundred years later, but the Pri Chodosh is no small fish. It's a big fish, and he says that the Rambam
forgot. Yeah,
he didn't put it in because he expects you to realize it's no different, let's say, than Kriyishma. Look at number 7. I threw in a shagas. Well,
doesn't make sense.
The Rambam wrote it in Kriyishma, which comes before matzah. So Kriya Shema isn't safe from matzah. When you come to Zmanim and you learn matzah, it's still fresh in your mind.
Why,
Well, let's see. Let's have a look. Yeah, sorry.
why eating Pesach after Zman is kares and matzah is not kares? Matzah is also kares.
No. It's just a mitzvah saseh. If you eat matzah too late, there's no problem in the matzah. You just missed out on the mitzvah.
Okay, so it's
No. If you eat the korban Pesach late, not only you didn't get the mitzvah of eating it, when it comes to kodshim, after the Zman things, it becomes a bomb. It becomes poison. It's chorus. Now look at number 7. This is a Shagas Arya. I just quoted the beginning and the end. It's Siman Dalet. And the Shagas Arya actually here, he takes on the Rambam, and the Shagas Arya goes head to head, and he throws the Rambam out of the... He has a number of kashas, and he throws him out the window. It's amazing. Shagas Arya was recent. He passes away in 1785. But...
Where's the Shagas Arya again?
He says Rebbe Aryeh Leib Ginsburg. Rebbe Aryeh Leib Ginsburg, he lived for 90 years. He was the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek, when he quotes the Shagas Arya in a tshuva, in a letter, he says, my whole body shakes when I quote from this Gon, who the entire Shas was in front of his eyes like a Shulchan Aruch. Some say 600, 1,000, yeah, definitely more than me. And the Shagas Arya says in number 7, he asked the following question: Ha de Kaimelon, we know Zman Kriya Shema of Arvis, evening Shema goes until dawn. Irashai lechatchila, can you lechatchila wait till right before dawn or not? In other words, do we hold about the safeguard of midnight by Kriya Shema? So he says, you got to know the Rambam. The Rambam writes in Perek Aleph of Kriya Shema, Eizes man Kriya Shema, what's the time of Shema? Balayla, says the Rambam, mitzvasa, from the time of Yitzias Kechav, when the stars emerge, ad chasra till midnight. The Rambam brings midnight by Shema. The Rambam says, v'im avar ve'icher, if somebody delayed, v'kara, and you read ad shaloi olam, before dawn, you're yaitza. What about midnight? Says the Rambam, shaloi amru ad chatzos. You know why they mention midnight? Kedei lahar chikadam and apshiyah. Just as a safeguard, if you leave it the whole night, I have 6-7 hours left, you'll fall asleep and you'll wake up after dawn. So the Shagas Arya says, the first kasha is like this. The hotnan, if you look in the beginning, the first Mishnah of Brachas, the Mishnah asks, Me'ei Masaya, even if you didn't get too far in Shas, you probably saw this Mishnah, the first Mishnah. Me'ei Masaya Korin Eshma Ba'arvis, until when, from when, but also until when can you read the evening Shema? So the Mishnah brings 3 opinions. Ad Soif Hashmur, Rabbi Eliezer says till the end of the first watch, which is either a third or a quarter of the night. Chacham Oimim till midnight. Ram Gamliel Oimer Ad Sheyal Lamud Shachar. It sounds from the Mishnah that Chacham and Rabbi Gamliel are having a debate. Chacham say there's a safeguard. Chacham agree biblically you have a whole night, because Minat Torah to say it stops at midnight wouldn't make sense. Chachamim say Minat Torah you have a whole night, but there's a safeguard of midnight. Gamliel disagrees. Now, who does the Rambam paskin like then? Like Chachamim. I mean, we have 3 opinions in the Mishnah, and the only Chachamim said the safeguard. The Rambam brings the safeguard, so it's a no-brainer. He passes like Chachamim. The problem is, if you open a Masechta Brachas on Daf Ches, the Gemara says there clearly the name of Shmuel, Halacha Karab Gamliel. So the Shagas Arya has a long pilpul, and he ends up saying, Hilkach in the next line, Hadover Bor, it's clear to me, not like the Rambam. The Le'in in Kriya Shema, we hold like Rabbi Gamliel. The Lei Slei Ahusok, he does not hold of the safeguard. Imrotz, if you want, Shaloi Likris, Atzamach, Hamad Shach, if you want to Lechatchil wait till dawn, or Shus B'Yoda, you have the power to do so. Kain Nirali. So the Shagas Arya and the Vilna Gaon and some others, they paskin, there is no safeguard of midnight when it comes to Kriya Shema. That's not the halacha that we are machmir. We are machmir, like the Rambam. But you have this debate. So here's the issue, though. According to the Shagas Arya, just like Kriya Shema, there's no safeguard. Samatzah, there's no safeguard either. Got it. But according to the Rambam, how could Rabbeinu Manoach say in number 5, the Rambam only holds of a safeguard when it comes to a chorus issue, when it comes to Korban Pesach, and it doesn't apply by Matzah? The Rambam brings it by Kriya Shema. There's no chorus by Kriya Shema. There's no chorus by Kriya Shema. So this is a shaila that Moshe Feinstein mentions in one of his letters. Now, how do you explain this? L'chayra, the Pri Chadash, l'chayra is right. Again, the Pri Chadash said, the Rambam holds is always a safeguard. Why didn't he mention it? I don't know. But but don't come to a thwarted conclusion because you have a question. Rabbeinu Menach says, no, the Rambam omitted it. There's no issue of midnight. It only applies when there's a chorus issue. It applies by Kriya Shema. How are you going to differentiate between Kriya Shema and matzah? So that's an issue. In the meantime, though, this is all in the world of the Rambam. Maybe we'll get back to it. This is all in the Rambam. The Rambam goes like Rabbi Akiva. It happens to be most Rishonim disagree. Most Rishonim paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Most Rishonim paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that you have to finish everything by midnight. And for this we go to number 6. Number 6 is the Bir Halacha, written by the Mishnah Bruder, Rabbi Kagan, who were a big yeshiva before the Holocaust in the city of Radin. And he wrote the Mishnah Brura on Shulchan Aruch. He wrote the Chafetz Chaim on Lashon Hara. And on the Mishnah Brura, which is halachas, he wrote a commentary alongside it called Bir Halacha, where he goes to town. He gets involved in the discussion, and it's beautiful. Often there's mamish quotes. So sometimes you have quotes mamish that come from the Alter Rebbe.
From in the beer,
There's lines that are from the Alter Rebbe's lines, but without whatever. They're old politics. Anyhow, he's become very popular in America. Before the Litvish Rabbanim will tell you that before the war, the Aruch HaShulchan was a more accepted sefer than the Mishnah Brura. The Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Epstein, who passes away about 30 years before the Mishnah Brura, so they're almost contemporaries. But the Aruch HaShulchan was more authoritative than the Mishnah Brura before the war. But here in America, it's changed very much. Now the Aruch HaShulchan, what?
Not sure.
Yeah.
It happened
But it's
also
because
in the middle 50s, Rabbi Zaks reproduced the Mishnah Brura.
So there you go.
So everyone bought
everyone learns it. Yeah. Now, often he and the Aruch HaShulchan debate,
especially
and before the Holocaust, they went like the Aruch HaShulchan. But here in America, they go now like the Mishnah Brura. Either way, those once a Fabrengen that there had been a meeting somewhere where a Yid had gotten up and spoke negatively about the Chafetz Chaim, and nobody at the meeting protested. And the Rebbe by Fabrengen heard about it and he was screaming. You had the Chafetz Chaim students there, and they didn't get up and protest their teacher's honor. And the Rebbe said once that people are asking, why am I getting involved? The Rebbe said, As a tutvei shreitman, if it hurts you, you scream. Yeah. So anyhow, so the Bir Halacha says like this. In number 6, go to the end of the first line. Ki b'Gemara Issa, he says, listen, you guys here are all scholars, so this you know this already. He's embarrassing you by telling you this. But in the Gemara, there's broader debate. Tiladas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we're in number 6, the second line. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is Pesach Minat Torah, biblically, Eina Nechel Elach till midnight. Who adin matzah, so too matzah. The it kishla Pesach, because it's compared to the carbon Pesach. And everything ends by midnight. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva disagrees. V'savra, he says, no. Pesach, Zman Achilas, you have a whole night to eat the carbon. Umemela, hu adin matzah, so too matzah. Zman minat Torah, kol alayla. So that we know, off the bat. A debate. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said it all ends by midnight. By the way, when we say midnight, we don't mean 12 o'clock. We mean the halacha midnight, which here is almost 1:30 a.m. Plenty of time. But if you want to go longer than that, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says you can't. It's over. Rabbi Akiva says no, you have till dawn. Now, who do we paskin like? V'yesh plukta bein Hashem. It's a big debate. Im halacha kol ben Azariah. Why? Mishum deyesh harbe stome mishnah kavase. There are numerous mishnahs and mishnayos that say halachas without anyone's name, and they represent Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. On the other hand, maybe passing like Rabbi Akiva, because halacha Rabbi Akiva mechavera. We have a rule: whenever Rabbi Akiva disagrees with one of his friends, you go like Rabbi Akiva. So who do you pass like? For Das, so he says Das HaRambam. The Rambam we know. V'harav HaMagid, the Magid Mishnah, who's the commentator on the Rambam. He was in the 1300s. and ubal ha'itur, va'ar zarua, these are all big rishonim, b'shem hari mikurvil, Yitzchak of Kurvil, Lifsaik, they all paskin, dezman achilas matzah kol halayla. So who paskins like Rabbi Akiva? There's a Rambam, there's the Magid Mishnah, but you have some big ones. The Yitzchak of Kurvil, known as the Samak, the Sefer Mitzvahs Cotton. He was a big Baal from the Baal Taisus in France. The Or Zarua was in Vienna, Rabbi Yitzchak of Vienna. These guys are in the early 1200s. These were all big Rishonim. V'yesh some say the Gam Das or Rifke, and even the Rif. The statement we saw in number 2 of Rava, the Rif doesn't quote. The Rif does not quote Rava. The Rif always quotes he plucks out what's Negei Halacha. He doesn't quote Rava's psak that these days you got to eat matzah before midnight according to Loza ben Azariah. Why doesn't the Rif quote it? Apparently it's not relevant because he passed like Rabbi Akiva. Achen, however, Yesh harbe, there's many Gdolei Shem the Svilu who know that after Chatzos you can't be Yotzeh. Vehem, who are they? So he lets you know. He wants to get involved in the discussion. You got to hear all the names to really get in the thick of things. Rabbeinu Chananel, who was the earliest fellow in this whole discussion. Rabbeinu Chananel was passes away around the year 1050. He was born in the 900s.
It's on each staff, yes.
Yeah, the Perek Avi Pesachim, the Smag. So there's two Sforim. There's the Smag and the Smak. The Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol, Sefer Mitzvahs Katan. They're both written by Baalei Tosfos, Ashkenazim. The Samag is Reb Moshe of Kutzi, of France, and the Smak is Yitzchak of Kurvil, also of France. But the two of them disagree in this halacha. The Samag, b'shem the Ri, Baalei Tosfos, the Ri is one of the greatest of all the Rishonim. They go like Rabbi Loza ben Azariah. And then in the brackets, he just quotes a few different Tosfos where Tosfos says this. V'hamordechai, the Mordechai,
Big guy.
his name was Mordechai, Ben Hillel. He was a student, he was a Kohen, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm mistaken. I think he was a Kohen. But he was a student of the Maram of Rottenburg, Reb Meir of Rottenburg. So you're talking mid-1200s, end 1200s in Germany. In fact, unfortunately, the Mordechai was born around the year 1250. We know the year he died. He was killed in 1298 in the Rheinfleisch massacres. In the south of Germany, of today's Germany, there were horrible massacres known as the Rindfleisch or the Rheinfleisch massacres. They say about 30,000 Jews were killed. The Mordechai was killed with his wife and his kids, the whole family. Gone, done.
You'll find him in the back of some shasin.
Yeah, sure, right.
I like him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a very prominent Rishon. You come from the Mordechai. So maybe not all of his kids. We have documented that his kids, maybe not all of them, maybe one of them survived the Chveisnish. I don't know what to tell you. Taka, you have an Einikel. We have the blood of the Mordechai at the shir today. Okay, and yeah, so Rab Mordechai at the end of Sachem, Rabbeinu Yeruchim, and of the Chain Mitzad the Or Zarua Gamken. And the truth is, he says the Or Zarua himself. The Or Zarua, we said, quoted from Rabbi Yitzchak of Kurvil to be lenient, but the Or Zarua himself, says the Bir Halacha, is leaning towards Rabbi Loza ben Azariah. Ayin Sham. The Lo Yotza min HaTorah, according to all these opinions, once midnight comes, biblically it's all over. You can't eat matzah. It's all over. Then he says, you have a few Rishonim who are unsure. Horekeach was actually a major Kabbalist in Germany, part of the Chasidei Ashkenaz, the pious people of Germany. And he was born in the end of the 1100s. V'harosh, the Rosh was a good friend of the Mordechai. Also Talmud of the Maram of Rottenburg, yeah. According to Marcus Lehman, he was a son-in-law, right? Just because Marcus Lehman says it doesn't mean it's not true. Right? But it doesn't mean... Yeah. What? Oh, you come from the Levush. Oh, Seder, yeah, Zichra, Levush is many. Yeah. That's a little bit later. Levush is a couple hundred... Levush passes away in 1612, right. The other Mordechai passes away 1298. Weiter, Vaharan. These 4 people, Mistapkim Bozeh. So you have a whole a number of Rishonim, big guns. The Rosh, the Rashba. The Rosh is a rabbi in Toledo, the Rashba in Barcelona, and the Ran in Girona, and the Rekeach in Germany. All these people are not sure. So you have it's a big issue. You had those that were sure one way, those sure another way, and those that really don't know. The Kosvu and these Rishonim who aren't sure, what do they tell you to do? To be cautious. Al Kain, they say yes, to be careful. Shaloi la'achar, don't delay Yosem Mechatzos, just in case. Then comes the Biur Halacha v'yesh marishim shekosvu, and there are other Rishonim who say that even Rabbi Akiva holds of the safeguard. It was only biblically his lenient. Like we saw, that some say Afila Rabbi Akiva is only le'inyan Torah, so biblically you have a whole night. Alva Mishum Archaka, the safeguard, his Moide, the Asal Lechatchil, it's forbidden to push it off after Chatzos. The Chen Kosav Hagra B'Biyurei. The Vilna Gaon, we're going to come back to this Vilna Gaon maybe just a moment. The Vilna Gaon holds like the Pri Chodesh. The Vilna Gaon holds like the Pri Chodesh's understanding of the Rambam, that even though he passed like Rabbi Akiva, that's biblically. Biblically, the mitzvah of matzah goes till dawn. Rabbinically, there is a safeguard. V'hinei, behold, mishum zeh, because of this, hichlitu harber, many achronim decided, and the chief amongst them is the Noida B'Yehuda, the after bevadai chayev lecho matzah af k'sheicher. What if taka it's after 2 a.m. and you realize you didn't eat matzah yet? You definitely should eat, because maybe Rabbi Akiva is right, but you can't make a bracha. You can't make the bracha al achilas matzah. The Shema halacha, on the one hand, you have to eat, because many Rishonim go like Rabbi Akiva, who says biblically the mitzvah goes till dawn. Minat Torah's man is a whole night. But al kaponim, you don't make al achilas matzah. Because sofek brachas lahakol. Whenever you're doing a mitzvah 50-50, you can't make a bracha just in case there's no mitzvah. So what does the Biur Halacha tell us? There's a slew of Rishonim who go like Rabbi Akiva, a slew that follow Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Then you have many that are not sure, and therefore they all tell you to err on the side of caution. And then he finishes off the opinion with the Vilna Gaon, that even the lenient opinions that follow Rabbi Akiva hold rabbinically you got to be done by midnight. And therefore he brings, if it's 2 a.m. and you just finished Magid, you're eating matzah, you can't say the bracha al achilas matzah, because you may not be yotzeh. So that's a big problem, because the second night of Pesach, all right, so let's go here. So,
second night is always Rabban.
Okay, but according to many opinions, there's no. Okay, let's go to the next page. Let's go look at number. We have 2 Alter Rebbes over here, and then we have the Avnei Nezer. The Alter Rebbe number 8.
Does Magid fall into the same thing?
Yes, the mitzvah of telling over Yetzias Mitzrayim. The pasuk says Ba'avur Zeh. You should tell your kids Ba'avur Zeh because of this. You have to be able to point to the matzah and the moror and the korban Pesach, and the understanding of that doesn't mean literally to point. You have to be able to point and say that this is. It's only while there's a mitzvah to eat the matzah and the korban Pesach and the moror that the mitzvah of telling the story applies.
Why would you say after?
Okay. So let's.
Can you repeat?
Yes, the Noida B'Yehuda says if you're running late, if it's 10, the Noida B'Yehuda Pasuk is 10 minutes before Chatzos, and you just you barely started Magid, you got to eat your matzah, you got to eat your moror before Chatzos, and do Haggadah later. Now you're wondering, but all the mitzvahs end at the same time. Okay, so as long as you get one word of Haggadah in, the Rif famously holds. Why didn't you make a bracha on the Haggadah the night of the Seder? Because you already yotzeh biblically when you're saying Kiddush Seichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. You already mentioned it. So when you come to the Haggadah, you can't make a bracha. You already did the mitzvah. So therefore, if it's right before Chatzos, the Noida B'Yehuda will say, get in the matzah and the moror, and you'll do Haggadah after.
And then you mavia.
Here's a wonderful kasha. Who's sitting in Bnei Brak a whole night? Rabbi Elazar? Rabbi Akiva, I understand. He holds the mitzvah goes till dawn. Yeah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is there. What was he doing there? So you have last year's shir, right? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah shouldn't, the story saying that God, he shouldn't be there. He holds it ends by midnight.
what was it?
So many hold, that's why it says it happened in Bnei Brak. Rabbi Kiva's the Rav in Bnei Brak. When you're in the rabbi's house, you don't voice your own opinion.
Yeah.
But there's other answers, and maybe we'll deal with it another time.
I got the share.
Sorry?
This was bothering me.
Which sif?
Saying the character.
No, we have it in number 8. In number 8, do you have number 8? So we have number 8 is a statement to the Alter Rebbe. Sarich lizor, you must be cautious. Lechol ha'afikoymen, to eat ha'afikoymen, koydem chatzos laila, before midnight. The Alter Rebbe does not differentiate between the 2 days of Yom Tov. And the truth is, these words are actually straight from Rabbi Yosef Kairo's Shulchan Aruch. These words, Sarich lizor, is the words of Rabbi Yosef. You have to be careful to eat the afikoymen before midnight. K'maya Pesach, just like the Korban Pesach. Shelo yehoya nechol elad chatzos, which was not eaten past midnight.
1 second. Who is the rule? Children.
Ulechatchila, though, says the Alter Rebbe, forget about toiv lahaktim es atzmo. You should pace yourself to finish halal as well after benching before midnight. Now these dinim are not the Alter Rebbe's. The first line comes from Rabbi Yosef Kaira. The second comes from the Ramah. Rabbi Yosef Kaira in the Big Shulchan Aruch says you should be careful to eat afikoymen before midnight, just like the Korban Pesach was eaten before midnight. The second line comes from the Ramah, who quotes the Ran, that not just afikoymen, you should get the halal after afikoymen you bench. After you bench, you finish the halal. You should get that all in before midnight.
Finish the Seder.
Right. So the question, again, the Alter Rebbe is quoting from Rabbi Yosef Kaira. Why does Rabbi Yosef Kaira say midnight? Rabbi Yosef Kaira is a big Rambam. Rabbi Yosef Karo. He's a big Rambam fan. If he's a big Rambam fan, doesn't the Rambam hold you have a whole night by the matzah? Doesn't the Rambam hold you have a whole night by the matzah? So there are 2 ways to understand the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Kaira. One way is his concern to all the opinions, and I name all of them that we saw before: Rabbeinu Chananel, the Ri, the Smag, the Mordechai Ben Yeruchim, the Arzurua, who all say you have to end by midnight. And then you have big guns, who the Ran, the Rashba, who are not sure. So even though he loves the Rambam, but in deference to all the other opinions, Rabbi Yosef Kaira says you should finish by midnight. That's one way. The other way is Rabbi Yosef Kaira learns like the Pri Chodosh, like the Vilna Gaon, that even if you pass him like Rabbi Akiva, there's still a rabbinic safeguard by midnight. Right? There's 2 ways to understand why Rabbi Yosef Kaira brings midnight. Either he's worried to the opinion of Elazar ben Azariah, because many Rishonim are, or he says, no, even the Rambam and Rabbi Akiva are only lenient biblically. You have till dawn, but rabbinically there's a safeguard. So there's a big shiloh, what's going on in the holy mind of Rabbi Yosef Kaira.
You also find sometimes that the Rabbi Yosef Kaira goes against the Rambam, like
Sure.
Chanukah. It's a famous case where he goes against in the order of the lights. I have to look it up, but I remember in Hilchas Chanukah they asked the question, how can Rabbi Yosef Kaira go against the Rambam? So it's rare. So
It happens, right. But so over here we have a shiloh, there's 2 ways to go. Okay, look at number 9. Number 9 is another halach of the Alter Rebbe, and Rabbi Shachat's brother in California, who I was zeicha to learn by, he has a big Chaim's uncle. He has a great passion for the night of Pesach, the Haggadah, and everything. And he has he once asked a big kasha on this number 9, and you'll tell me what you think. The Alter Rebbe says like this. The number 9 comes earlier in Shulchan Aruch than number 8. Number 9, the Alter Rebbe says like this. Umikol Makom, he's talking about the beginning of the Seder. Lo yemar lahaschal kiddush. You can't make kiddush the night of Pesach before it's certainly night. Afal pi shavashar yomim tovim yachal adam. You can always be moisif in bechol hakodesh. Every yom tov you can bring in early. Lekadosh v'lechom b'yom. You can make kiddush and eat while it's light, as long as it's after Plag Mincha. Mikol Makom, nonetheless, but Pesach is different. Sukkos we learn out from Pesach, fine, right? Seder Shavuot, right, also. Eino Yachol Lasad, you can't do it on Pesach. Lefi, why? Now, Rebbe says, Achilas matzah, eating matzah, hukshis, compared to eating the Korban Pesach. Shenemar, as it says, al matzah sumarim yachlu, you should eat the meat with matzah and maror. Ubepesach nemar, by the Korban Pesach says you should eat the basar, the meat, balayla azeh, at night. Night means night, balayla mamish. So just like the meat has to be night, as far as the earlier time, only when night sets in, and that's a clear pasuk, so too matzah. Now the kivon, since eating matzah, which is biblical, Einu el balayla only starts at night mamish, therefore kol la'arbeka, all the 4 cups as well, shetiknu chachamim, Einu el balayla. The chachamim follow the same pattern. They said the 4 cups of wine which are rabbinic, it can only begin at night mamish. Bisman haroi lachil is only at the time when you could eat matzah. Shekol ma'ashatich, whenever chachamim make a rule, ke'ein shel Torah tiknu, they pattern it similar to the Torah's rules. And the cup of kiddush is one of the 4 cups. Fichach, therefore, you need mamish night. You can't be moist if you can't bring Yom Tov in early. So the Alter Rebbe says very simple. What? Okay. Rosh Hashanah. Right. So
So the
Alter Rebbe says very clear, very simple. The Torah says the Korban Pesach, the meat starts at the beginning of the night. Matzah is compared, and therefore the 4 cups which Chacham created, they patterned it with the same time. So Rabbi Shachar's brother asks, so wait a second, there's 4 cups of wine, right? The first one is Kiddush. The last 2 cups are well after Afikomen, right? Yeah. One's after Bich Samozon, and the 4th one's after all the way at the end. L'chayra, if all 4 cups have to follow the time of matzah, then you should have to finish the 4th cup by midnight.
Yeah. Isn't that what he says?
He doesn't say that. In Vav, no. In Vav, he says Afikomen l'chatchila toiv lahaktim ligmer sahalal. Okay, so the idea of halal is what the Ramah says. The word halal. The Ran says halal. The Vilna Gaon in his Bir Hagra says halal means the 4th cup. That's what the Vilna Gaon says. Halal means the 4th cup.
Because you finished the 4th cup.
Means finish the Seder before.
Fine, it's a 4th cup. It's 4th cup. What? So, but the question is, why does Alter Rebbe say number 8? L'chatchila. In number 9, the Alter Rebbe says you cannot make kiddush before, because kiddush 4 cups need this man of matzah. But when it comes to the last 2 cups, l'chatchila, toiv, if you can pace yourself to get them in.
So basically,
why? What's the difference?
You have 3 hours for Seder, according to this, roughly.
How long does Ma'ariv take?
No, you have to wait, because this time of the year.
You come right home. Wait. Even his, you can start at 8:30 if you run home 8:30, so and you have till 1:30, 5 hours, plenty of time.
So you're trying to
if you don't waste any time,
okay.
If you don't spend 4 hours on people asking Manishtana, you can get a lot in.
Well, it depends.
Anyhow, so hold on. So what's our answer going to be? This was one of the. Listen, Rabbi Shachat's brother. I'm sure Rabbi Shachat himself has many insights as well. No, so that's not important right now. The important
you don't want to know.
No, but simply. So first of all, the Vilna Gaon was Taka Machmir on the 4th cup. The Vilna Gaon says when the Ramah says halal, it means the 4th cup, and the Vilna Gaon says Taka, and the Vilna Gaon says whoever says Afikomen is mistaken. The Vilna Gaon says no, it's not Afikomen particularly; it's everything.
So it seems like.
But why that? The Alter Rebbe says no. Look at number 8. Afikomen, you need to be careful. The last 2 cups. What's the difference? It's like this. When it comes to the first cup of Kiddush, nobody allows you to bring Yom Tov in early. It says Balayla by the Korban Pesach, Balayla by Matzah, finished.
So the last one's
but when it comes to the end of the Seder, there's lots of room, there's wiggle room, because Rabbi Kiva says you have a whole night. Here's the difference between Afikomen and the last 2 cups. Why Bechlal do we eat Afikomen? So I'll quickly tell you 3 opinions, and then we're going to go weiter. Rashi, in the end of Pesachim, together with his grandson, the Rashbam, both believe the Iker Matzah, the night of the Seder. Do you know which matzah you're actually fulfilling your mitzvah with? The Afikomen. Not the first matzah that you eat. You make a bracha al chilas matzah. So Rashi asked the question, and he answers. How bizarre and perhaps disrespectful to the mitzvah would it be if you ate matzah without a bracha, and then later on after you stuffed your boich with matzah, now you decide to make a bracha. So therefore, you make a bracha the moment you put it in your mouth. You make a ala chilas matzah.
That covers.
But
So
the shalah says, from when you make the bracha ala chilas matzah, you can't talk till afikomen. You can't talk during Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, the shalah and Reb Chaim Brisker was machmir. If you went to Reb Chaim Brisker's Seder during Shulchan Aruch, there's no chit chat. Because you need ala chilas matzah to cover the afikomen, because Rashi and the Rashbam and other Rishonim as well hold that the afikomen matzah is the real matzah, and the reason they say that is because they believe when you eat the afikomen, why are you eating it? It's to remember that just like when there was a Beis Hamikdash and they ate the Korban Pesach, they ate the Korban Pesach at the end of the meal, right? It was the last thing they ate, and they ate it with matzah, right? And that matzah was how they fulfilled their obligation then. The matzah with the Korban Pesach. So too at the end of our meal, we eat matzah not to commemorate the Korban Pesach. It's commemorating the matzah they ate with the Korban Pesach. So this matzah is the real deal. And therefore the shalah says, you make the alachilas matzah, you can't talk till the end of the meal.
So would you need the kedei
You would have...
Because I have sick.
No, because the last kazayis you eat b'chtei achilas pras.
If you started the mitzvah.
As long as you eat a kazayis b'chtei achilas pras, you're good to go. In other words, someone eats 5 kazaysim over 10 hours, but one of them was within achilas pras, it's good. Okay, well, listen, so let me. So, the Rosh himself disagrees. The Rosh says, the Rosh says the afikomen is just a custom. It's a zeicher to the Korban Pesach. We're eating the matzah to commemorate the meat they used to eat at the end of the meal. It's just a commemoration. Okay? And then you have Tosfos and the Ritva who say something else. Tosfos and the Ritva say, you know why you have afikomen? Just so you should leave the Seder with the taste of matzah in your mouth, not the taste of knedlich, if someone eats knedlich or whatever you ate at the Shulchan Aruch. You should leave exactly. Yeah, kompot. You should leave. She ate tam matzah. She has 3 opinions of why you eat afikomen. But according to Rashi and his grandson the Rashbam, it's mamish the full-fledged mitzvah. So that would explain the Alter Rebbe in number 8. And in number 9. When it comes to the cup of Kiddush, you can't do it early. No one allows you to do it early. The end of the Seder, you have Rabbi Akiva. You have a whole leeway till dawn, perhaps. But when it comes to afikomen, you should be very careful. Why? Because according to some Rishonim, afikomen is the mitzvah of matzah. It's a biblical mitzvah. So then you got to be careful. It's a biblical mitzvah. Some hold it ends by midnight. But the Hallel and the last 2 cups are for sure only rabbinic. And usually by rabbinic, you could be lenient. And the end of the day, you have those that hold like Rabbi Akiva, you have a whole night. That would explain the Alter Rebbe. Anyhow, but here we come to the clincher is number 10. Let me just say something that I think, which is probably not true, but my gut tells me, I believe my gut is not worth anything, I don't have to say that, but when it comes to Kriya Shema, there's a safeguard till midnight. Kriya Shema is a biblical mitzvah. Even if the Rambam would agree when it comes to the biblical mitzvah of matzah, there's a safeguard till midnight, but when it comes to afikomen, the Rambam does not hold like the Rashi and the Rashbam that afikomen is the main mitzvah. In fact, the Rambam holds you don't have to lean by afikomen. The Rambam holds you don't have to lean by afikomen. It's definitely not the main mitzvah of matzah. The Rambam probably, let's say, holds like the Rosh. It's just to commemorate the Korban Pesach. It's just a zeicher. So why would the Rambam add a safeguard if it anyway is only a custom? But the Rambam holds b'chlal you have a whole night. If it's a biblical mitzvah, so the Rabbanim will say, be careful, save it. But if it's anyways only rabbinic, they're not going to have a safeguard on a Rabbanon. So therefore, I would say that, and that helps understand the Alter Rebbe even better. When it comes to afikomen alein, since Rashi, the Rashbam, hold is biblical, so you don't do by chatzos. But when it comes to Hallel and the last 2 cups, which are for sure rabbinic, the Alter Rebbe would say you can rely on the Rambam. And the Rambam himself won't hold of a safeguard by the last 2 cups. It's just the cups are rabbinic themselves. You have a safeguard on the Rabbanon. That's what that's right. You see, because if even the Rambam holds everything as a safeguard, so then you for sure finish by midnight. Meaning, right, 75% share. Rabbi Elazar Zai says you have to end, and even Rabbi Kiva would say to finish by midnight. But if you say that when it's a rabbinic mitzvah, the Rambam does not hold you at a safeguard, it's very well understood. The last 2 cups, the Rambam would say, yeah, have a whole night. So on that, you could, that's why the Alter Rebbe says don't get too frazzled about it. But either way, we come to number 10. We're going to finish with this. Number 10 is a fascinating tshuva of the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer, we mentioned earlier, Rabbi Avremel Bodenstein, and he was a Chassidic rebbe and Rosh Yeshiva. He passes away 1910. Born in 1838, passes away 1910. And he was the story we said about the son-in-law of the Kotzker Rebbe. There's lots of good stuff with him. Anyhow, he actually once said, if anyone has lichtika eigen, if you have bright eyes, you'll see how the Alter Rebbe in his Shulchan Aruch is so careful in his words that he preempts all of Rebbe Kiva Eger's kashas. He says you can answer all Rebbe Kiva Eger's kashas if you're ever so careful reading the Alter Rebbe, but you have to have lichtika eigen. You have anyhow. He was a brilliant mind. He says in number 10, we're going to go, this is very interesting. Nasati al-Libi. This is the whole tshuva. And this is a well-known, everyone talks about this. Le'inyan or la'ayin, to analyze, be'inyan birchis ala chilas matzah va'ala chilas morer. We make a bracha al. This once came up by Chanukah.
By al, not
al
le.
versus le.
Le.
So, umaharoi, it would have been better to say lechel. Why? Kivan shul mitzvah she'ef shel kaimai de shliach. Many Rishonim say any mitzvah you have to do yourself, you say le. Le means to do. A mitzvah you can get a messenger to do, then the nusach is al. Because God really cares about it being performed rather than you yourself performing it. When it comes to eating matzah, you can't ask someone to do it for you. So you should say le. He says the Ramban and the Ran be'emes say lechol. If you would be at a Seder of the Ramban or the Ran, you would hear them making a different bracha. You say, what type of Haggadah do they have? The Ramban and the Ran paskin, you say lechol matzah and lechol mor. Ach girsa sfarim, our girsa in Arvei Pesachim is al. Why? So he quotes the Levush Kosav, mishum de Baal habayis moitzi kol hamasubin shayach yoser al achilas. The Levush says that the Baal Bayis makes the bracha on everyone's yoitzer. So since the Baal Bayis is making the bracha on everyone's behalf, he doesn't want to say le because the bracha, it's a hard thing. The bracha is transferring to everybody. I know, I don't really understand it because, so some people understand the Levush that since the Baal Bayis is like being your shliach, so therefore it's like a mitzvah that can be done through a shliach. Yeah, but we're not talking about the mitzvah. We're talking about the bracha being done through a shliach. I don't want to. The tiritz ze'ein. He said either way it doesn't work for us. Kol echad mevarach la'atzmai. By us, everyone makes their own bracha, and nonetheless mevarchin al. Why? The Choik Yankov, Rabbi Yankov Reischer, a big rav in Poland, passes away in the 1720s. Kosav, he says, Lefisha ein mishan in Loshen Torah. It's a pasuk al matzah sumaroidim yechlu, on matzah moish eat the meat. Al, it says al matzahs. Frekt Avnei Nezer that's mixing borscht with cholent. V'tomtema ma inyan al matzahs la alachilas. The pasuk of al matzah sumaroidim is talking about eating the korban pesach on matzah and morer. What does that have to do with when you're talking about the mitzvah of eating matzah if you say al or le? Well, it sounds like a joke. Well, if in his deity, so here he's going to say a whopper. Now, you have to pay attention because this is it's revolutionary and it's definitely it raised a lot of eyebrows. In fact, Rav Moshe Feinstein does not like this entire tshuva. And Rav Moshe Feinstein, I couldn't get it on the paper. His tshuva itself is 3 pages. He dismantles this whole tshuva of the Avnei Nezer. But listen, Avnei Nezer was an unbelievable genius, and he took it upon his shoulders to sometimes say things a little bit out there. He says like this: "Ulefi on his diet, in my opinion, near it seems. Litein tam mashim avorchin." I have another question: why do you say al bir chometz? V'lchei should say levair, to destroy, not on the destruction. Devadai lahabo mashma. The Gemara discusses in Psachim, when you say le, it always means in the future. Al could mean on something I already did. So Lu is a better bracha. But let's say that when a ger toivels, a ger has to first toivel, and then he makes a bracha. Can't make a bracha before, he's not Jewish. Yeah. So since he makes a bracha after, he says al hatvila, not litvol, because he won't be doing anything after he benches. So he says al. But when you're making the bracha before, Lu is grammatically a better terminology. So why don't we say levar chametz? Va'ayin Tosfos and the Ran, there's a big sugya about this in Psachim Daf Ches. Ulefini is that if you ask me, I'll tell you like this. When you burn the chametz erev Pesach, you're actually not doing a mitzvah. We burn it before the time. The Torah says, comes midday erev Pesach, you can't have any chametz. So when are you supposed to burn it, before or after? So this is a major discussion. I remember I once taught Masechta Psachim when I was in Australia. I had a group of boys, 6 boys, very clever boys, and we sat in a little classroom, in a little ivory tower somewhere, and we learned to, and I'll just tell you that it's there's so many inconsistencies about this very question. The Torah says in Erev Pesach you have to destroy. The Gemara says clearly the mitzvah begins after midday. But does Hashem want that by midday you should have already destroyed, or the act only begins by midday? There's lots of confusion about it, at least by me. I'm sure those, each Pesach himself knows what he's saying, but when you try and collect it all together, it comes quite confusing. But either way, says the Avnei Nezer, he says the following pshat. The Eibishter wants that when the time comes of midday, you should have already done it. Even there's a debate. Should it have been done or should you have done it? You can also get even deeper there. But either way, so says the Avnei Nezer, when you burn the chametz, you're doing the act of the mitzvah. You don't fulfill it, though, until this man comes. So therefore, you can't make a bracha, Hashem told me to destroy, because the actual destroying is not the fulfillment of the mitzvah. You only get it later when the time comes.
And you don't have it.
Right, so he says you have to make a bracha that sounds like this. Hashem commanded me, al, that when the time comes, I would already have done what I have to do. Because al means the past, like when the ger tovels. So he says like this, Nira, kivan the mitzvah's beer. When do you do the beer? Nase bagia Pesach, only when Pesach arrives. That means midday of Erev Pesach. The ein ha-beer mitzvah mitzad azman shenase by beer. The destruction is not a mitzvah at the time that you do it. Rak mitzad Pesach shebo achar. It's only when the time hits, which is after you actually destroy it. The kivan shebagia Pesach, when the time comes of Pesach. Again, that means midday of Erev Pesach. Kvar nisbar achometz. It's already happened. So shayach yoyse levarach al. Be better to say al. Demash menami l'sha'avar, which means the past. V'loy levar, not levar. Deloy mashme elabo levar. Levar is when you're about to do something. But since this is an interesting mitzvah, which the action and fulfillment are separated, so when you do the action, you make a bracha that sounds, Hashem commanded me that when the time comes to the mitzvah to be fulfilled, I would already have done the action. He says now he goes right. He says, now I can understand. Why do we say al? We said the Ramban and the Ran say you say lechol matzah. Why do we say al? He says, don't you know Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who says achilas Pesach is till midnight? V'yolif migzeda shava of Hashem going through Mitzrayim, just like there chatzos af halayla zed, just like Makas B'choresh was midnight, so too eating the meat and the matzah till midnight. V'adover yipala, it's a wondrous, and he asked the question we asked in the beginning. Havara, when did God through Egypt? It was the actual moment of midnight. Ve'ech yolif lachilas Pesach ad chatzos. How could Messiah tell you you have to eat the matzah and the Pesach till midnight? Because God smit Mitzrayim at midnight. What does at midnight have to do with till midnight? But Sorech Loyimar says like this: Kivan, since since you can't eat b'chatzos mamish, what should he say? You have to eat the kazayis the moment of midnight. It's impossible. There's no duration. An action needs hemshech, needs time to be carried out with. Al karchach, so therefore he was forced to say, B'chatzois yekvar habasar pesach nechel. The mitzvah is like this. He said it's just like burning the chametz. You divide between the action versus the fulfillment. The action, the mice is eating it. You don't get the mitzvah then though. You have to wait when chatzos comes and you already ate it. That's when you get the fulfillment. So something, it really happens by chatzos, but the action is impossible to fit it in. Then there's no time frame. You do it
The
earlier.
of the mitzvah that you feed the whole thing is by chatzos. If everything is completed.
Right,
chatzos,
exactly,
then you do it.
exactly. V'chein, but so too matzah that we learn from Pesach, and for sure moror d'chsiv gabe Pesach. Fine. The imkain therefore, kivan de mitzvahs matzah moror. What's the mitzvah shebagia chatzos? When according to Rabbi when chatzos arrives, yeh kvar nechal, it's already eaten. So therefore, better to say yoser tov levarach ba'al, like we said before. You can't say Hashem said lechol to eat the matzah because when you eat it, you don't get the fulfillment. You have to say al Hashem commanded me that when the time comes for the fulfillment, I would already have done, because the word al means something that has already happened, just like when the ger goes to mikveh. So that's already one major chiddush. It's very strange. You're dividing between the action and the fulfillment. He's not done yet.
He's only explaining it. He's not making any changes. He's only explaining.
Yeah, but most people say it's not true.
What he's saying.
Yeah. Most people say Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah doesn't hold there's a difference. Just like Rabbi Akiva. Even he would agree, according to Rabbi Akiva, you have till dawn. You don't divide between. It's not that at dawn you get the fulfillment. There's no reason to say that. It's a big chiddush to say what he's saying. He's the first one that says this. But then he says further, he goes even better. Why don't you eat after the afikomen? You can't eat afikomen. What does that mean? Afikomen, Shmuel says in Gemara, means dessert. Afiku mana, bring out the geschmack of food. And maftirin means to do something after. And ein maftirin achra pesach afikomen means that after the Korban Pesach you cannot enjoy afikomen desserts. She'asur lechol, you can't eat achra Pesach. Now why not? Why not? You know, there was once a shul in Poland which was a shul of simple people, ignorant people. You know, no scholars were allowed. Anyhow, it was the Shabbos after Pesach, and the gabbai called someone up for maftir. And the rabbi says, there's no maftir this week. They said, what are you talking about? He says, ein maftir in achra Pesach. They said, oh, you're a scholar. They threw him out. Anyhow, but why taka can't you eat after the Korban Pesach? What type of rule is this? So I want to tell you, so there's the Rishonim all grapple. There's many ideas brought. Ulahanal, that the Alter Rebbe just says in Shulchan Aruch simply that the Chachamim wanted you to have the taste of the Korban Pesach, and nowadays the taste of the matzah in your mouth. It's hard, you know. By no other Korban is there such a halacha. You can't eat there. Like, why? Okay, fine. That's a discussion on its own. But look what he says. Ulahanal yesh lefarish. He says brilliant. He's unbelievable. He says, according to what we just said, that you do the action of eating the matzah, but the fulfillment's at midnight. That come midnight, you already ate it. But you have to be able to link the act of eating to the time of the fulfillment. What's the link? You still taste the matzah. It has to be when chatzos comes, you still have the taste in your mouth. That's why. Ulahanal yesh lefarish. Kivan, the mitzvahs when chatzos comes. Im kain, if you already ate it and you've already lost the action, how are you going to link the two? The action still has to have some physical, it has to still be around. Tzarach sheyeh tama pesach, you have to have the flavor in your mouth. Shelo yekol, that it shouldn't disappear. The im pesach mekol v'kol. Al korchach, you have to have the flavor of the matzah, oz. V'yishor oz roisha ma-mitzvah, and you have a bit of the taste of the mitzvah in your mouth. And the same thing for Korban Pesach, and the same thing for matzah, they're the exact same. So that's an incredible chiddush. Again, no one ever said this. In fact, Moshe Feinstein in his tshuva, he really tears us apart. He says no one ever heard such a thing. That
it's a reach.
No, but why is he saying this? Now we come to the clincher. V'alkein niruladina. Therefore, he wants to paskin. He says, brilliant. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, once the clock ticks 12, you're allowed to eat. Why? Anything you want. Why can't you eat after the afikomen, which is the matzah nowadays? Because when chatzos comes, you need the flavor in your mouth.
After chatzos.
Yeah. So he says, what if you're running late and, it's 20 minutes before midnight and your wife's just about to serve the meal? We're going to tell her, forget about it. We're eating the afikomen. So he says like this. He says, no, you do it like this. Laman da Omar, according to Blaz Mazarya, the Eina Pesach Nechel except till midnight. And so to Matzah, he says, Achar Chatzois Mutalechel. The only reason you can't eat is so that when Chatzois comes, you still have the action is extant because you have the flavor. But once Chatzois comes, eat what you want. And then he says, B'chlal b'lav hochi nira, it has to be. According to Blaz Mazarya, after Chatzois, it's all over. Why wouldn't you be able to eat?
Yeah.
Again, Rav Moshe says it's not, he disagrees, but Avnezer says after this man, Vadai, there's no chiyuv that the flavor should be in your mouth. Rak bisman, only during this man. After Chatzois, it's all over. Why would you have to have them? Valkain, therefore, near it seems like this. If in the middle of the meal, or be'emtzo, you're during soup, you see it's 10 minutes till Chatzois, but your wife still wants to search the dessert, right? She's been making this Pesach Dika dessert, you better eat it. So what you should do like this. You should eat a kazayis matzah al tanai. You make a condition. The famous condition of the Avnei Nezer. Everyone talks about it, but they only quote the last couple lines. Now you have the whole background. Yeah. Says the Avnei Nezer, you know what the condition is? You say like this. It's 5 minutes before Chatzos, you're eating a gefilte fish. If the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, this is my afikomen. You eat afikomen right then, you have a kazayis. And then you wait 2 minutes till the clock ticks 12, till Chatzos. And then you eat. V'yamtin adlach, wait till Chatzos, and then you eat your suda. V'achakach, and then you eat another afikomen for Rabbi Akiva. Yoytze mana, either way you're yoytze. If halacha Rabbi Elazar that it all ends by midnight, I already had my first afikomen. And achar chatzas, mutalechel, you can eat what you want. And like Rabbi Akiva, no problem. I have till dawn, and I had my second afikomen.
Either way you can eat it.
This is the famous condition of the Avnei Nezer. Reb Chaim Brisker did this. What?
Why do you do it?
Because according to Rabbi Akiva, your first afikomen was no good because you ate after it. By the halacha, if you eat after the afikomen, you got to eat another one. It's a strict halacha. So you got to eat two. And Reb Chaim Brisker used to follow this condition of the Avnei Nezer, and Reb Moshe Feinstein in his tshuva, he disagrees with the whole thing. He says this whole thing is too original. No one ever said it. It's a nice shir. It's a nice discussion. It's not halachic, and Reb Moshe says he according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, even after Chatzos you can't eat. You can't eat. Why? Because the Mishnah, you have to go to sleep with the flavor in your mouth. Your soul needs to descend to heaven that night.
You have all the different
listen,
and that we talked about the whole shit.
No. As far as Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah.
As far as about Rabbi Akiva.
No, but then you're playing with fire. Then you have the Bechal. You're going back to the original debate. Hold on. So let me just. Rav Moshe has a few points. Rav Moshe's other point is that he believes even the Rambam and Rabbi Akiva hold of the safeguard.
Which means
If you hold of the safeguard, you can't do the Avnezer's condition because Rabbi Akiva doesn't let you just eat the meal. In fact, Rabbi Yitzchak Weiss, the Minchas Yitzchak, was a big Rav in Yerushalayim a couple decades ago. He had that same kasha just like Rav Moshe. He said, I don't get it. He says so many poskim, the Pri Chadash, the Vilna Gaon, many poskim hold that even according to the Rambam and Rabbi Akiva, there's still a safeguard of midnight for matzah. And therefore they say that, what's that talking about? Even Rabbi Akiva would say you got to get it in by midnight. So I would tell you what my gut said before. Even if the Rambam holds of a safeguard, it's only on the matzah, which is biblical. Right. Not on the afikomen that the Rambam holds it's just a zeicher.
And the way the Alter Rebbe writes it, that you can be...
Not about afikomen. In number 8, the Alter Rebbe differentiated. Afikomen, he was more machmir.
The second part, according to them, you shouldn't be able to do the second part.
Correct. Moshe Feinstein says you got to get everything in by midnight.
The Alter Rebbe in number 8
so let me I got to run next, but let me just tell you that there's a well-known Hayom Yom that the rabbeim, when it came to the second night, they were marich. It seems like they ate matzah well after Chatzos. The Mishnah Brura and the Noid B'Yehuda hold that you can't make a bracha ala chilas matzah. the second night after Chatzos, is not this. Forget about Afikomen. This is the real matzah.
Where's the
Who
mashmat
does it
rebbeim?
that late?
Because they were so machmir, very, very late.
Who does
No,
it
it says not Yom
Afikomen,
Yom.
you mean.
Yeah, but we
Not
don't.
the-
No, well, they were
matzah.
they were Meirich and Shulchan Aruch. They were Meirich and Magid.
But we don't do
If
that.
they had the matzah before Chatzos, so what were they waiting for? No. It's Magid. They were Meirich for sure. That's what it
Yeah,
said.
but
They were Meirich and
matzah
Magid. Hold on.
Matzah comes after.
So what's the pshat? So L'chayr, since it's the
Rebbe
second
talks
night,
by
it's
the
only
Seder.
by the Rebbe Seder.
I used to come, it was the Rebbe already ate the Afikomen.
Right. So I heard one of my older Rosh Yeshivas told me that he was by the Rebbe Seder Zabacher, and he saw the Rebbe even the second night was always careful to have afikomen before
The
midnight.
second night, he used to
Even the
want
second night have afikomen before midnight.
from
It
the-
seems like the earlier rabbeim was just the opposite. Even the moitzi matzah they did after midnight.
The Rebbe Rashab-
After
the Rebbe
Chatzos.
Rashab
Where
used
you-
to-
So what? It says they were ma'irich till 3-4 in the morning. But where were they ma'irich in Shulchan Aruch?
No.
In Magid. But either way, they definitely didn't do afikomen before. So
Rebbe
that you
Rashab-
definitely have a debate. The Rebbe was machmir afikomen before Chatzos, the Rabbeim not. It seems to me even moitzi matzah, but definitely afikomen. So if afikomen, you have a simple answer that most Rishonim hold afikomen is not the main matzah. It's just the Rabbanon, right? And it's the second night, you know.
And there's no separate rock on it.
And it could be that the Rambam L'chatchila said that afikomen you have a whole night. There's no safeguard because it's only a rabbinic.
The Rebbe doesn't
So the second night
differentiate
you could be a man.
between first and second night either.
Correct.
But waiting for
But,
Afikomen to Kazesi.
It's not. The Alter Rebbe doesn't bring it because the poskim before him didn't bring it. The Alter Rebbe is not going to create something of his own.
What about the first and second night?
No, apparently none of the big poskim said it. The Alter Rebbe has no one to quote from. He never creates his own, brings his own. The question is, what if the rabbeim Poshut had moitzi matzah after Chatzos?
Rabbi Korf was saying Rebbe Rashab did it after.
Yeah, l'chayra. The Rebbe Rashab was moitzi matzah after
Rebbe
Chatzos.
Rashab the second night, he did not
He was meirig voor in Magid is oder meirig gewesen. In Magid. So wenn hat erst gegessen the matzah, gar spät, noch Chatzos.
No, before Chatzos.
So what was he meirig in?
It's just a maggot.
No, that he,
Change the Seder of what to do.
no, the
That's what the
Rebbe
Rebbe Yehuda
Rashab
says to
was-
do.
Was they did not eat it later on.
No,
The Friedrich Rebbe, our Rebbe, even that he did before midnight.
right. But the Rebbe Rashab was meirig till very late, close
Yeah,
to
the
dawn.
second night he was in my
Yeah, meirig in what? In Magid.
Yeah,
In
I mean,
Magid.
the whole-
What else could it be? How else could you learn the Hayom Yom? Meirig in what?
During Shach they spoke about during
Magid.
No, Magid is a text.
No,
You don't make
Sure, that's when
drushes
you
during
give drushes.
text. No.
Yeah.
Even today, after you
By-
have to
by
call
the
text
people,
is-
even
No,
today,
already, you
the
can
mitzvah
talk.
l'saper, according to many, the mitzvah l'saper, you have to be able to point to the matzah. You can't have eaten it yet. Bavur Zed has to be in front of
It
you.
would have been a chiddush. Would have been explicitly stated that they ate matzah after chatzos.
It didn't want to clearly say. So it could be.
in the Sefer.
So I would tell you that I would tell you it doesn't say it clearly because of it's against a clear noidib Yehuda. It's a halachic issue, but I do think it's implicit in the words. We have it over here. The Rebbe Rashab was careful the first night to have afikoim before chatzos. The second night he was ma'irich. In other words, afikoim definitely after, but it doesn't say moitzi matzah. But then it says he would start before 9 and he would finish at 3 or 4 hours after chatzos. And he was ma'irich bebir ha'agoda. Not during Magid, during Shulchan Aruch. All right, so we'll. Anyhow, I got to run next door. There's a,